Good evening. My name is Austin Stager. I'm going to be presenting the first half of this presentation, followed by Ernestina, then David, then Mark and Gary. So we are Group 2, and this is our password policy brief. So the introduction and problem statement. The CIO of Middle Georgia State University has tasked Group 2 with conducting research on passwords to evaluate the existing security policy. We were to provide background research, and with that research, provide a better understanding of what is needed for the revised password policy. The main points of interest for this presentation will include password strength, complexity, age, history requirements, as well as single sign-on, enterprise federation services, multi-factor authentication, education and training, and logging and auditing. So far as for the background, we have password characteristics. Password characteristics, mainly focusing on password use and memorability. When you create a password, most of the time you have a username and password associated with your account. Sometimes maybe just a password. But regardless of what it is, your password has to be something memorable. And it's a large factor when it comes to creating a password. So when it comes to password reuse, people tend to want to use the same one over and over again so they don't have to deviate. With password reuse comes potential security risk. So, if there's a potential data breach or data leak, a credential could be found, and if they can use that credential, they can get access to the system. So for research portion, keystroke analysis can be assisting in determining password use characteristics to lower password reuse. On a similar point, and as comparison, fear factor was used to determine if that would be a better alternative for deterring password reuse. Of the two studies, keystroke analysis for determining reusability of the password was 81% accurate, while using a scare tactic or some sort of education material to help people understand why not to reuse the same password was 88% effective. Password strength. Passwords today consist of lower and uppercase characters, special characters, numbers, and alphanumeric properties. This also has to go in relation to memorability. If your complex passwords have too many requirements, too many numbers, too many symbols, the length, any of those, it's going to make it difficult to memorize. Analysis shows that some password complexity and strength approaches spend too much effort in areas that would not necessarily make a big difference. Having this said, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about a password, like a breach of some sort, if someone gains access to a credential, and they find that the requirements only maybe 10 to 15 characters, and then you're only using numbers and letters, they're not going to try and deviate from the norm because it seems to be a trend. Another analysis provides two studies based on information in relation to password cracking, and then the second study consists of hypothesis 1 and 2. Basically, information system majors will initially be more aware of security issues, as well as they're able to create stronger passwords. The results show that out of the 275 passwords examined, 125 are broken, and then you can see the different variations from each in this chart. The second study also proved that only 42% of information system majors provided better password complexity. This also goes back to password age. As we discussed before, when you're reusing a password, you want to make sure that you have an age requirement. So the user can't just change their password 6 times and then move right back to their initial password. A study conducted shows that most don't change their password regularly. And then a NIST standard suggests that this is another reason not to require excessively long memorized passwords. and by implementing password age into the mix, assist in lowering the length and complexity requirements. So it kind of leverages itself out if you think about it from a password age standpoint. If you force them to use a password for X amount of days, then they're going to be like, okay, well, I have to suck it up. I have to use it this way. My name is Austin, and this has been my portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, this is Ernestina. I'm covering single sign-on, federation identity, and password managers. Single sign-on is the process of using only one username and password combo to access multiple systems. The benefits and disadvantages of single sign-on includes that a user would experience simplicity of using one set of credentials. It is more secure and requires less passwords to manage. The downsides includes continuous maintenance. It's vulnerable to hacking, and if the password is lost and that one password is the only password, all access to all the systems connected would be lost. Single sign-on best practices and a real-world example. When considering to implement a SSO deployment, it is best to test a small section first, using the least significant aspect of the organization, and regularly communicate with others. In implementation of this is a healthcare system with 19 hospitals who replaced their keyboard logins with ID badge readers. Federation identity is a central identity to access multiple applications within a network. There's three components to this: the user, identity provider, and service provider, and together they create the circle of trust. In federation identity, the benefits and disadvantages. The advantages: the user gets a better experience accessing their work applications without having to keep up with multiple passwords. Disadvantages means that sometimes the passwords are weak. There's multiple providers, insider threats, and identity theft creates vulnerabilities. Federation identity best practices and real-world examples. Allow only the level of access required. Educate your employees about the security risks, and some of the real-world examples is Amazon's AWS, SAML and SML2, and WS-Fed. Password managers. They're vulnerable to imposter websites. Google Chrome has a built-in password manager. There's also a commercial called Dashlane. It's a standalone manager. And there's also open source versions. Yubico is a physical security key that provides access to a system.
Hello, my name is David Teston, and I will be discussing the multi-factor authentication portion of the assignment. Multi-factor authentication is defined as the verification of a user's identity through two or more pieces of identifiable evidence. There are three main categories of these factors, which are what you know, what you have, and what you are. The category of what you know is typically comprised of passwords and or PIN codes. But in addition to those, security questions are also a question of knowledge and can be considered part of this factor. The second category is what you have, and is typically comprised of smart cards or hardware keys, but most commonly we see OTPs or one-time passwords. These can be manifested in ways such as SMS messages sent to smartphones, cryptographic hardware keys or capacitive touch keys, and then time-based tokens, whether that be a physical token or a soft token via an app. Additionally, these OTPs can either be statically or dynamically generated, and they can be asynchronous as well, which is where a device does not need to access the server to receive the OTP. It's just rotating the OTP based on a clock schedule. NIST has some categories for these authenticator assurance levels, or AALs, which can be used for compliance as well. The third category is what you are, which is typically comprised of biometrics like fingerprints and retina scans. Biometrics are very convenient because you always have those things with you, except in extraneous cases. And biometrics have a degree of failure, meaning that a haircut or a paper cut on your finger could interfere with the authentication process. Multi-factor authentication can also be applied to physical security or high secure areas of a building. Middle Georgia's data centers and server closets should definitely have MFA applied to those locations, such that just a badge is not enough to get into these places. A lot of data centers require biometrics, badges, and a check-in at a security desk in order to gain access to the data center floor. A final layer of the authentication process could be metadata analysis against historical data and user trends, such that a foreign location, an atypical location for that user may prevent login, or first-time usage of a new device may prevent login. And in addition to that, it's possible to apply artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms to the metadata itself, such that the data can be analyzed and given an assignable score, and pass or fail would determine whether or not that login can succeed. It is important that Middle Georgia considers using more than 2 factors for authentication when it comes to financial and healthcare data, given the nature and sensitivity of this data. It would not only ensure higher levels of security for access, but it would give the end user a more secure feeling using our systems as well.
My name is Gary Miller, and I'll be going over the following sections: security awareness training, system logging and auditing, and the solution and conclusion. Security awareness and training. Awareness and education are essential to any security program, but more especially to information security in higher education. Providing information security awareness training is a crucial factor in having a mature information security program. This will ensure that members of the institution community, such as students, faculty, and staff, receive awareness training that's important in identifying security-related threats. As a summary of research conducted on the best practice, the revised password policy will have a monthly training for all new employees that start within the past 30 days. Training materials should be made available online and on demand. Implement creative ways such as gamification to reward employees for being proactive and knowledgeable of current threats. Topics covered for Security and Awareness Development Program include the following: Clean Desk Policy, Bring Your Own Device Policy, Data Management, Internet Usage, Antivirus and Anti-Malware, Situational Awareness, Social Networking, and Email. Clean Desk Policy. A clean desk policy is designed to keep the workplace from having items that an employee is not currently working on. It keeps the area free of sticky notes, printouts, and papers that could be quickly taken. Desks should be cleared at the end of each day. It should be cleared during the lunch hour as well. By keeping the desk clean, it prevents snooping and theft of information. Bring Your Own Device Policy, or BYOD. The IT department will identify devices that can be used and the appropriate software that will be needed to work on the university's network. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and VPN software should be included. Organizational security policies can be pushed per application to add an additional layer of application security on the devices as well. Antivirus and anti-malware software are required to be added to systems for additional security per the USGIT handbook and assist in remediation of virus and malware infections. A BYOD device will need to be monitored if it will be connecting to organizational resources which can present a security risk. Thus, proper antivirus and anti-malware programs may need to be implemented or verified on a BYOD device, depending on device evaluation. Data management. Data protection and management should be highly considered as well. User understanding of the different types of information data they are handling and the value of that data when attempting to safeguard it. Removable media such as USB drives should be used with caution. If a USB drive is found that is not yours, Do not attempt to put the drive in your system to see what's on it, as it could contain malware. The same goes for external hard drives. Internet usage. Users should be up to speed on spear phishing and the different methods used to steal credential information. Users should be taught to enable pop-up blockers, verify security certificates, and phishing tactics such as clickbait. Users should not execute or run software without checking the software first for malicious code or Trojan horse malware via scan. Situational awareness. Physical environmental aspects should also be included in awareness training as it pertains to the physical security of the organization and its information system assets. Shoulder surfing and piggybacking, tailgating are common forms of social engineering in relation to situational awareness. Social networking and email. Users should be made aware of organizational social media policies. Phishing should be discussed in relation to personal social media information available from public web sources. Users should be cautioned about leaving too much personal information on the internet. Antivirus, anti-malware software, and malware. Remember that end users are the target. The different types of viruses and malwares should be discussed or covered. Users should be taught some of the warning signs to detect malware such as unexpected sluggishness or abnormal behavior such as auto-opening websites or command prompts. In the next section, we'll be covering system logging and auditing and the best practices associated with that. Logging plays a critical part in checks and balances for all information security assets. Logging and auditing allows for identification of potential security breaches before and after the event, which is important in an investigation and root cause analysis. It's highly recommended to implement a logging and auditing process to review and validate authentication requests against rights granted. Account lockout event log are events that are typically associated with 5 or more unsuccessful login attempts. This can be viewed as a brute force attack. The recommended information security practice is to institute an account lockout after 5 attempts have occurred and record an alert log. Not having events reported could leave an organization without visibility into potential security incidents. Password change event log. Users typically change passwords after a set number of days or hours in the case of a temporary password. Password history can help to prevent users attempting to circumvent security controls by cycling through old passwords until the last variable number of passwords have been reached, which allows the old password to be reused. Malware has also been known to initiate password changes or resets to prevent the user from resetting their account. Successful versus failed login attempts. Logging successful login information is considered a low-level event. However, if multiple failed attempts have been received and a subsequent successful login could indicate a successful brute force attack. Logs should be monitored by the Security Operations Center and the Security Information and Event Management System to detect brute force attacks and provide an alert. Administrator activity event, also known as privilege escalation. An account attempts to use privileged access to change or alter administratively associated records or resources. Logging this type of event is important for verification of privileged access. Logging of user IDs. A user login having timestamps can help with behavior and pattern tracking of critical systems. Logging of terminal identity or machine name. This information is considered valuable in any investigation. Having a log of which machines were accessed on the network can help trace secondary compromises. Logging of files and networks access. When accessing networked or local resources, it can be a time-saving activity to know which files have been accessed or changed by a user account. Logging of files associated with user changes can have a lot of time in determining initial compromise. Malware that are associated with zero-day vulnerabilities can change vast amounts of data on a disk and alter creation and modify timestamps. While this type of logging can be cumbersome in large environments, it should be used where access to confidential information is required. Logging changes of system configurations. Using a change management platform or procedure is a good way to track changes related to a compromise. Comparing changes between devices and files can help identify or pinpoint the moment in time a system was compromised or altered. Logging triggered alarms. Triggered alarms can be associated with third-party applications running, such as antivirus or anti-malware applications reporting an infection. Knowing the timestamp of an alarm can help evaluate risk and how severe the security incident is. The solution and conclusion for this white paper. Multi-factor authentication should be leveraged to lower access breach risk, and use of one-time passwords can increase difficulty for attackers that attempt to subvert the authentication method. Password age should be tied to the risk of a critical system, with quarterly change for accounts with admin level access and biannual for accounts that include multi-factor authentication. Training is highly recommended to ensure constant user adaptation to the threat landscape. Robust logging and auditing systems are needed to help validate access and shed light on incidents and events. Finally, the increase in computing power and resources concludes that continued password length increases are unsustainable due to the complexity and the user memorability of passwords.
As far as Appendix A goes, we have a revised password policy. The password policy sections that we've revised is all in yellow. This is to highlight what we have changed. And so far as password construction, there must be at least 10 characters long, and it must contain all three of the following. So you have to have uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and numbers. It may not contain the username or anyone of the full name. It may not be reused. And password dictionary should be taken into account. So there's no easily cracked passwords. Check for pawnage. All attempts to create a new password should be run against a blacklist of compromised values. There's obviously sources that you can use to check that. Passwords must be unique and not used for any other system. If one needs help, for a strong one, you can remember a phrase, add some numbers and letters to it. We have some examples here. My dog has fleas, all one word. My dog with a 0 has capital letters, and then fleas, just as an example. They must have changed their password immediately after setup as well, from initial login. And then you have quarterly changes. So every 3 months, password must be changed. And then when and if available, utilize multi-factor authentication as one of the primary methods to verify your identity. And then for references, this is what we have for references. And this is the presentation.